Greetings. In light of my discussion with Spetsnaz the other day, and in a general sense, something I've been thinking about for quite some time, is the nature of MGTOW as a prophylactic, as a preventative measure. Now, I actually think that the most potent aspects of MGTOW are those aspects which act as a prophylactic. We spoke to a large extent about young men who have taken the red pill and how they deal with these things and how they go about these things and just the challenges they have in contrast to someone who's wizened and old, such as myself, or people still older and even more ancient. Not having the same opportunities to go through these quote-unquote wild experiences or what have you. But there's another element to this. There's a really important element, and that is the notion of the lived experience. There's no doubt in my mind, and in my case, as well as the minds and cases of many, many other MGTOW-minded men, that their lived experiences were, in all likelihood, the primary contributor to them going their own way. The things they experienced, they saw, they felt, led them, for a variety of reasons, to take the path of MGTOW. At the same time, there's this notion that lived experiences are essential, and I do think they are essential to the individual. So the lived experiences of Stardust are important to me. I wouldn't trade them for other lived experiences. But sometimes there's the idea, the notion that particularly young men, they can't know what it's like. They can't know X, therefore Y. And the idea of compassion and the idea of willingness to help and the idea of simply avoiding risks, none of this entails actually going through the same lived experiences as some men. For example, in a very crass, crude example, I don't need to tell, a young man of, say, 20 or 22 or whatever, who listens to my videos and hears that I had an ex-wife or ex-girlfriend, to use the conventional parlance, that attempted to snip off my sexual organ. He doesn't need to know or go through that, know the experience directly. He doesn't need to go through it directly to know that's a bad thing, that he probably doesn't want to be in that situation. Just as you don't need to experience acute food poisoning to know that acute food poisoning is something that you probably don't want, nor do you need to be swimming in the great white shark-infested waters off the coast of Perth and get your leg bitten half by a great white to know that that's probably not the best idea. I've heard one story of a man in the manosphere whose wife quite literally poisoned him with some sort of cleaning fluid. He nearly lost his life. I've never been through that. I don't want to, and I don't think it's necessary. I don't think other men need to go through that. And frankly speaking, I've never been officially married in the conventional sense. I don't want to experience that either. I don't want to reproduce and experience the loss of offspring. There's probably some potent physiological, emotional thing going on there that no doubt can teach you a great many lessons about the mistakes you've made, but why repeat the mistake? So what I'm saying here is that in life there's a host of experiences that don't need to be replicated, but can be learned from and observed from another vantage point, from another point of narration. The narrator, if I'm telling a young man that it's probably not a good idea to shack up with a woman who likes to snip off your pee-pee, or if you're in a car park like I was once and she flies into a fit of rage and tries to drive the car into you, also not the best situation. You probably don't want to be poisoned by cleaning liquid, and you probably don't want to dive into shark-infested waters. Really common sense things here. On the other hand, these lived experiences have informed many of my views, have given me, I would say, the intellectual backbone to actually look up some of this stuff and try to understand what was ultimately behind it. Female nature, male nature, human evolution, etc. And These lived experiences on an individual level are incredibly important, especially for older men, such as myself and others. But with regards to the younger men who, quote unquote, might be missing out on whatever, be it, pussy or partying or female companionship, or these horrific experiences some of these older guys have gone through, such as some horrible divorce situation, loss of offspring, acute food poisoning. Why go through that? In order to help someone, for example, if you see a person drowning in a lake and you want to help the person, you don't need to simulate drowning for yourself. You just, to the best of your ability, try to help the person drowning. If you see a person, fall down a flight of stairs and is injured, you don't need to go up to the top of the stairs, fall down the flight of stairs, and try to simulate it yourself. You just try to help the person. So in a sense, in the most important sense, MGTOW, the very basics of MGTOW, serve as a prophylactic for younger men, so they can avoid a lot of the needless suffering, pain, tragedy, and I would indeed claim needless adversity that many of us have gone through, and many of us far, far greater than I've gone through. I've never officially been married. So with that said, there is one truism in life, and that is without adversity, without challenge, you cannot grow. In a completely stale environment, one without challenges and rigor, and that is just sort of flat and monotone that never changes, that person is not going to evolve as an individual. That is clear. But challenge and adversity needn't be directly harmful. It can be beneficial nonetheless. Young men can challenge their minds. They can challenge through intellectual endeavors, the sciences, learning languages, whatever. They can challenge their bodies through sport, whatever sort of sport they enjoy. They can offer themselves a lot of challenges in trying to understand the world themselves, their place in it. They can try to understand the mysteries of the universe in attempting to understand particle physics, which I don't understand and probably never will. They can do all kinds of things that are challenging, that will bring them forward as individuals, that will develop their ability to cope with life. And more importantly, since these younger men who are wise because they've been informed by their elders who have gone before them and have suffered essentially in their place, they don't need to develop the kind of coping mechanisms that some of us have developed in order to simply survive some of these experiences. Every time I've heard a story about some guy in a relationship where the woman sounds somewhat vaguely like a borderline personality disorder, I don't care who he is. If I know him, and I said, get out. Just get out. Leave. Run. There's no hope. There's no saving her. Go. Just go. Why do I say that? I've been through that, and I nearly lost my life after that relationship, my livelihood, pretty much everything. It was psychological torment. You don't need to repeat that experience. You don't need to go through a relationship with a borderline personality psycho in order to avoid that, in order to be a person who enjoys and seeks self-improvement and development. There have been many claims, particularly recently, that I advocate doing nothing with your life. Of course, I've never said anything like that, but yeah, who cares about what I've actually said? And claims that the loss of motivation, which is a documented fact, and so many MGTOW can attest to this, that often ensues when you take the red pill, right? That this equates to just doing nothing. That's absolutely not the case. As for myself, just to talk on this matter briefly, to speak on this matter briefly, I found that my priorities have switched. I'm very motivated by my intellectual endeavors now, much more so than I used to be in my 20s. In my 20s, as I pointed out to Spetsnaz, I was an emotional wreck. I ran on pure emotion. And so, yeah, I was artistically infused, and I could do a lot of stuff like that. And I'm considering, in the coming months, maybe the end of the year or beginning of next year, assuming I'm still alive, of taking up formal art again, but probably just portraiture and still lives, just to get the old skills and the juices flowing again. That wouldn't be an emotional endeavor, though. That would be an endeavor to redevelop a technical skill that I used to have and probably could reacquire, given my genetic proclivities to being a relatively good artist. So, challenge, I just wanted to get that out of the way. Challenge is relative, and adversity needn't be harmful. Which is not to say you can't go through harmful situations where you experience a great deal of pain and legitimately harmful adversity, and come out okay or on top eventually. I mean, I've nearly lost my life in relationships, in one particular one. Well, actually, if you count the car trying to run me over. Yeah, so, and there are other guys who've been through far worse situations. Like I said, I forgot who he is. There's some guy whose wife tried to poison him with some kind of dishwashing liquid or cleaning, something really deadly, and he barely escaped with his life. And today, apparently, as far as I know, he's doing better, and a lot better. So yeah, you can triumph. You can move past these things. You can learn from them. You can reach a place of quiet and peace of mind. But you don't need to go through all of that. What I would advocate to younger guys is, to the extent that you can, look for those challenges which are wholesome, that bring personal development. Pursue your passions as long as they're not destructive. And just go with that. There are always new intellectual challenges out there, and there are always new athletic challenges out there, even if you're not particularly athletic. I'm not. For me these days, the challenge is going to the gym, having an intense workout at my age without too many joint problems, getting it over with. I have very short intervals between sets. I always do a full body workout. It's pretty heavy, etc. So there are always things, and that's something that I was able to do at an earlier age, probably more efficiently, but now I need to pace my time out and space it out a bit. That's okay. So you always new challenges to undertake and do things in life. But the notion that you have to go through the same thing as the rest of us as a young man, I think is ludicrous. There's no point. Why go through needless suffering? I mean, it's true, suffering can bring about personal development and growth, but it is not the be-all and end-all. And if you're not going to experience that suffering because you're wise and you've learned from people who've gone before you who have suffered, why bother? As for the other issue of the feeling of missing out, I think Edmond Dantes, the lord of the amazing haircut, this guy has one of the best haircuts I've ever seen in my life, I should add. He did make a pretty good video about missing out on things, and that's absolutely true. Wherever you are, you're missing out on something. If you're in London, you're missing out on being in Berlin. If you're in New York, you're missing out on being in LA, although LA is a really shitty place. You're not missing out on too much. No offense to denizens of LA. So, and this is just true of all activities and all people. If you're talking with a professor of physics, you're missing out on a conversation with a professor of biology and vice versa. You know, what's there to it? That's just the nature of reality. And conversely, in the case of female interaction, if you are not actively engaged in relationships or dating as a young man, yeah, you're missing out on sex and quote-unquote intimacy potentially, but you're also missing out on false rape accusations, the potential of becoming a father that didn't want to become a father, the psychotic, emotionally disturbed women that might inflict some serious damage on you, might even physically harm you. There are many, many things you're missing out on that are truly worthy of being missed out on. I can say that much. And then ultimately, it's a question of risk assessment. How much is the risk worth it in terms of your interactions? So there are really two elements here. There's the notion of missing out and going through this experience, and the notion of just these lived experiences that older men have gone through. Absolutely not necessary if you're a young man. I don't think so. That's my opinion. Maybe you want to push yourself. Some time ago, I was talking to a guy, I might have mentioned this before, in a long-distance relationship with an American, Dutch guy, occasionally play games with him. totally effusing with emotion and how great the relationship is and how he's going to move to the States and marry her because that's the simplest solution to get a green card or a work permit or whatever. And I did my best to advise him against that. But here's a guy who he insists on going through with this. And statistically, it's stacked against him. Who knows? Maybe he'll be a freak occurrence and it'll work out, but unlikely. People do what they have to do and what they feel is necessary. The difference between him and you as a young man, though, is that you know certain things. You know the data, you know the stats, you know about all these experiences, and probably, in all likelihood, you wouldn't go through such a ludicrous experience as that. So, thinking about the things that you're going to miss out on that are harmful, like all the nasty emotional manipulation, the destructive physical behavior, the potential of becoming a father you don't want to be, being accused of rape, of going to jail. These are also things that you're missing out on that are well warranted to be missed out on. So this is something to think about. And I do not agree with the idea that we all need to go through the same experiences to really relate. After all, I may not be able to relate to a denizen of Perth who had his leg bitten off by a great white shark, but I know it's probably a bad idea to go into those waters and risk that kind of injury. I might be able to directly relate to his pain, but I can learn from his pain and learn from his loss. And the same is true of men that have been emotionally and indeed in some sense spiritually, for lack of a better word, sort of truncated by their relationships and nearly destroyed in the process. Learn the lessons from those who have gone before you. I think that's the best thing MGTOW can do for anyone. MGTOW is a prophylactic for young men above all. Men my age, and particularly men older, we're going to be dead pretty soon, and you have your entire life ahead of you, free of some of the horrors that we had to experience. So if you ever hear an older MGTOW say, no, you haven't gone through this, you don't know, you can just reply and say, no, I don't know, but I know it's a bad thing, and I don't need to go through it myself. Anyway, that's all I have to say on this subject matter. More videos to come as usual. And as always, enjoy your weekend, and may your chosen deity watch over you. Bye-bye.